you have a proposal to make, then make the proposal, but your proposal cannot be wonderful life for everyone, please, right? Because it doesn't make any sense and it doesn't really advance your dialogue. So no motherhood statement. Let's have some details. What do you talk? When you say more, what do you mean by more? 4%, 5%, what? When you say less, what do you mean? When you say longer, what do you mean? Right? Don't say more for life, more. It doesn't help the discussion at all. So let's try and avoid motherhood statements. Number 4, and I think this is also important, if you have a proposal to make, I think and this is why we call it an honest conversation, you should also highlight the good things of your proposal, but if you know that your proposal has some downsides, you should highlight those as well. You shouldn't be afraid of talking about pros and cons because, and this is important, there is no perfect plan in this world. If there's a perfect plan, every country will be doing it. But as you know that there's no perfect plan in the world, whenever you have a plan, there will be some downsides, there will be some risks somewhere, some downsides somewhere. And in any plan, one group of people may well do better than another group of people. It's bound to happen. No one is ever going to be treated the same in any plan, right? So there will be downsides to any proposal. So let's be honest and recognize the downside and talk about it. Just as there are downsides with our current CPF system, that's not a problem because there's no perfect plan. And number 5, if you can, and I hope we can do this, that if you have a proposal where you want any particular group of people to take on more, to get more, then I think we have to recognize that when we want one group to have more, we also have to recognize that one group will get less. So I think let's be honest about it. But that's not wrong. There are no wrong answers there. If you think that the older generation should get more, that's fine. That's a valid view to take. But you also have to address and identify who do you think should sacrifice so that others will get more. Because otherwise, everyone will just get more, then everyone gets more, everyone walks away happy. But it's not unrealistic. It's not realistic. And so we need to talk about that as well. And this is important because when we talk about CPF, there is a tendency to talk about the people and government. Right? The government should pay me more, the government should do this, the government should do that. But you know, the government is not a person. The government is not a person. And I said this in Parliament, what the government really does is the government comes up with a framework and the government allocates risks between different people. If you want to pay more to the older generation, then the younger generation bears more responsibility. So it's just allocating risks. So it is not right to talk about transferring risks between government and people because what you're doing is just transferring risks between different groups of people. Right? So the question is, as I said, we will frame the discussion by way of broad questions. It's not meant to limit you on what you want to talk about, but I think these are good questions to try and focus the discussion so we get somewhere. The first question, which is something which I think we all need to address because it's convenient not to deal with difficult questions. But I think in a forum like this where we are to talk about how to improve the system, we need to talk about difficult questions as well. And so the first question I hope you will ask yourself is what do we do between us as Singaporeans, what do we expect of ourselves? So if a Singaporean runs out of retirement funds, and that's a common phrase now, right? I'm 55 or I'm 65, just give me my money, this is my money, why do you care what I do with it? That's a perfectly valid point. But let's deal with the next question. If you give someone money and he runs out of it, how as Singaporeans do we want to resolve that issue? It's commonly said that, you know, we shouldn't put Singaporeans down, they know what to do with their money, they're all not going to go run to the casinos and gamble it away. We're not saying that. We're not saying that at all. But people lose money for different reasons. Some people gamble it away, maybe a minority. Some people just make bad investments. Some people just have bad luck. You know, different people are put in different circumstances. And ultimately, if everyone wants to manage their monies, which is a perfectly legitimate argument, but if everyone wants to manage their monies, fine. But there will be a group of people, and a fairly sizable group of people, who will run out of funds. And they still need to live, and as a nation, we still need to make sure no one suffers. And I think as a nation, we have done quite well. Almost everyone has a roof under their heads. No one goes hungry in this country. We do better than most. We're not perfect, but we do better than most. But There's a reason why that happens, because there's a particular system in place that allows that to happen. But if we want to change the system and everyone takes their own money and decides what they want to do with it, as I said, perfectly legitimate, but we need to ask ourselves, what do we do with then that group who may have bad luck and who may run out of money? Different people have told me different things. Some people say, well, let them beg. It's okay, that's their problem, right? That's their choice. But are we as a people prepared to go down that road? If we are not, then what do we do? So let's talk about it. Again, no wrong answers. Number two, which is really, I think, why this talk was organized. Should there be a minimum sum? And as you know, it's related to question 1. Because your answer to question 1 will determine your answer to question 2. Which is there a minimum sum? And if you think there is, because there should be some co-responsibility between government and people, then how should it be calculated? Are we selling it too high today? Are we selling it too low today? Interesting point about Lucy just now, who said, oh no, I only get $100 a month, but that's because your sum there is very low. Yeah, no, but that's the thing. So if we had kept minimum sum, say at 80,000, which is what it was, I think, in 2003, then of course you can do that, but your payouts then will be very low. So there's a trade-off somewhere. But is it too high? Is it too low? I don't know. Let's talk about that. Number 3, and finally, having now understood what the CPF is, what changes would you like? And I think this is where I think many people will have their proposals, which is fine. But as I said, when you give your proposals, just let's be honest and let's talk about the upside and downsides. Let's talk about who benefits more from your proposal, who benefits less from your proposal. Because definitely any change you make will affect different people different ways. And let's be honest about that. And as I said, underlying all these questions will be the issue of how risks should be shared among Singaporeans, right? Old and young, current, future generations, and so on and so forth. So these are important questions and we should talk about it. But I think it's not useful to have a discussion if we do it on a very unrealistic framework, which is, let's just let everyone do what they want and never mind what the consequences are. Then it doesn't become a realistic or constructive conversation. Let's talk about real issues. And if the consensus is that, yeah, let people take their money, then that's the consensus. And that's what's going to appear in my report when we send it to everyone. Okay, that's the consensus. So what? And I don't know, I was trying to think of an analogy of CPF, and not a perfect analogy, but what I thought is driving. If you are a driver, why should there be speed limits on the roads? If I'm a driver and I'm safe and I'm a responsible driver, the government shouldn't tell me how fast I can drive. I can take care of myself. Why should there be speed limits? Why should there be cameras? Why should there be fines if I'm responsible? But sometimes, the rules are there, so it's not just to protect you, but to protect other people as well. And that's what it's all about. It's not just about protecting you, but protecting everyone else as well. What is the social contract we have, which is if I don't speed, I make sure everyone else doesn't speed, so we're all safer. You know what I mean. Now, before we go off and we split you up into groups, and we have a logical way of doing it, I would like to show you one chart which I found particularly useful. And these are again based on facts. If I could have the chart. Once we get the chart. I don't know which country this is. Switzerland, is it? Yeah. Okay.
So they ask you to retire.
Retire in the mountains. Okay. Okay, I hope you can see this. I think it's important. I personally think it's an important chart. Let me explain what this is. This is actually the Singapore national budget. Let me explain how it works. If you go to financial year 2012, right? Financial year, let's run down. Operating revenue, that means the government's revenue, what the government collects, revenue. This is from taxes, COE, property tax, whatever. That is $55.81 billion, right? In 2012. Expenditure and special transfers, this is what the government spends, and then this is a transfer, your transfers to your CPF account, the government spend on education, housing, whatever. Everything the government spends is 57.86. Now pause there. Even in year 2012, you'll see that the government spends $2 billion more than it collects. $2 billion more than it collects. Where is the balance coming from? And that's our next figure, which is the net investment returns contribution, $7.87 billion. The net investment returns contribution is the investments we get from our reserves. Some years back, we amended our constitution to allow the current government to take the investment returns from the reserve. And I think a few years ago, we amended it to allow you to take up to 50% of the investment. So roughly, if whatever the government invests in the reserves, whatever is the returns from those reserves, the current government can take 50% of that for its own current expenditure. The other 50% goes back to the reserves for future generation, right? So in a way, we are actually drawing from our reserves as well. Not the principal, but the interest. 50% of the interest, you can look at it. So that's 7.87 billion. And that makes up for the deficit of 2 billion, and therefore gives you the overall surplus of 5.82 billion, right? So in other words, because we are taking the interest from the reserves, we are plus for year 2012. What happens to the plus? So the current government has a number of options. The current government can put it all back in the reserves, or the current government can decide to spend it again by way of saying, again, CPF top-ups or share, you know what we do, the ERS and so on and so forth when we do it, right? The government can do that. So it's 5.82 billion. Now, 2013 is revised because we recently closed that. So this is revised. So the operating revenue, again, 57 billion, so the economy did better. So the government collected more taxes and so on, GST, whatever. 57 billion, so 2 billion more. But you look at expenditure now. Expenditure has gone up 61 billion. So government is spending more money now, again on public issues, on public things. But the returns on investment, 50%, is about still there, 7.9 billion. That gives us an overall surplus of 3.92 billion, right? But now look at 2014. This is only budgeted because we haven't finished 2014 yet. The actual figures will be known next year. Our revenue, again, has gone up about 2 billion odd. Again, the economy doing better, 59 billion. But look at spending now, up to 68 billion. So we are spending more and more every year, right? You can't run away from this fact. This is actual. Spending more and more every year, and this will include your Pioneer Generation Package and so on and so forth. All the spending that comes in. Investment contribution, again, all this is budgeted and estimated, not actual yet, but it's up to about 8.1 billion. But for the first time, we are going to have a negative. In other words, even with the interest which we are drawing, 50% interest, we are going to have a deficit of 1.1 billion. Maybe it will be 1.1, maybe it could be worse or could be better. We don't know because these are only budgeted figures. If the economy does poorer, then revenue is less, then it's likely to be a larger deficit. If the economy improves, then maybe it will be a surplus. We don't know. But this is what is budgeted now. Now, the reason why I thought this would be useful, and these are all actual figures you can get it. The reason why I thought it would be useful to show you this is because when you say, and when anyone says, look, why can't the government pay more? Or why can't the government pay 1% more or 2% more and all that? You have to ask yourself, where does the money come from? Because it has to come from one of these. It has to come from one of these. There is no special fund somewhere else where the government draws money from. It either comes from the money the government collects as revenue, or it comes from the money the government gets from its investment returns. There is no other fund. And so, which is why I talk about balancing interests and talking about trade-offs. If you say the government should pay more money to one group of people, you also have to say what you're willing to give up. We are already going to be likely to be in a deficit in 2014. As I said, we don't know it's budgeted. But there is no other fund that we're talking about. And I thought these numbers are useful to give you some perspective on what the budget or the fiscal realities are that we are dealing with. There is no unlimited money. Money is always limited. And so your argument could be, and maybe one of the reasons, things you raise is, why not draw 75% from investment reserves, from the returns? That's a perfectly valid argument. But all it means is that you're putting less money back into reserves, which means the future generation has less to work with. It's a perfectly valid point of view, but as I said, when you do one thing, it means it affects something else. And I want us to be honest to recognize that. As I said, there's no right or wrong, but let's just recognize the trade-offs. Otherwise, it's not an honest competition. Okay? Okay. So are we all okay with this? No right or wrong answers, but I think we can try and get something. Yeah. Yeah.
That as expenditure include the salary that we pay to the minister, the prime minister, and the president.
Okay. You can, as I said, we are not here to politicize debates, but let me deal with your issue. Okay? If you want to pay all our ministers zero, that's fine. It's not going to make any difference to the numbers. Okay? Alright, so, yeah, it's nothing. It's nothing. Even if you paid everyone zero, the numbers won't change. Why? Because the annual budget is only, we are talking about in the M's, not the B's. Okay? So let's be sensible about these things. One last question and we'll break up.
Yeah, Mr. Kumar, I'd like to ask, I mean, that's not really an accurate presentation of spending because it includes special transfers. For instance, in 2014, you're putting the whole of the Pioneer Generation package of 8 billion into current spending, which is not an accurate reflection because actually you're only spending, I think, about $250 million this year. And so every year I notice the finance minister transfers basically the whole of the net investment returns contribution into new long-term funds. So it's not actual spending on the people. It's actually just putting it back into the reserves. So it's, you know, I've called it smoke and mirrors.
Okay.
And then, you know, the net investment returns contribution, where you say you're spending 50% of the returns on the reserves. The actual figure for the surplus, I think in 2012 was about $30 billion. So, you know, the government is making much, much more than 50%.
You can publish your own figures on your website.
Well, the problem is we can't get the figures from the government.
Well, you have these figures here, so you can use these.
But, yeah, I know, but
These
we won't give us the figures. All right.
You can ask a question. You can ask your friends to ask questions.
All right.
And questions
All right.
and answer. These are
Thank
figures.
you.
Thank you.
Okay? I want to deal with reality here. And I hope we all will do that as well, and not make things up. But, so let's have a proper conversation. Right? So, now this is how we do it. Again, I'm not doing it any differently from what we do. But I think we found that in previous dialogues, that if we group people together of like mind or like interests, then we're not really going to get anywhere. There has to be some tension within the group, otherwise we won't really have a proper discussion. Now, where CPF is concerned, the tension, I think, will really be amongst the different age groups. What the retirees want, what the younger professionals want, what the students want, what the people with kids want. I mean, those are where the tensions are likely to be. For COEs, the tensions are different, for budgets, the tensions are different, and so on and so forth. So what we propose to do is to break up everyone into groups, and each group will be represented, or will have different people in different age groups there. Now, this will involve some moving around of people, so I hope you don't mind. We always do this and we find that it can be done quite efficiently. Today, we also have a group which is normally not represented, which is normally not here, which is the non-resident group. For some reason, how many of you are non-residents? Okay, great. So as I said in my blog, in my Facebook, this was a dialogue for residents. Non-residents are here, you're welcome. Welcome to Thomson Payoh. I hope the coffee is good. But because this is a resident dialogue, I'm going to put all the non-residents in one separate, if you don't mind. Okay? So this is how we're going to do it. Where are the different groups?
Okay, we're going to split, as what Hari mentioned, we're going to split residents and non-residents as this for Thomson Payoh residents. So we will split into 6 groups. Okay, basically we understand there's quite a lot of non-residents, so we'll split you up into 2 groups. Okay, so you can actually have a very good discussion with our moderators. Can we have can I have all my moderators to step up first? Moderators? Okay, I presume you all know your group number with this time, right? Okay, so can I have group 1 here? Group 1, group 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so moderators, please move your respective numbers. So for what I'll do is I'll split you all up first. Non-residents, can you all please stand up and proceed to that corner? You all will be in group 5 and group 6. Non-residents will be in group 5 and group 6. Okay? Thank you.
For this to work, we actually need people to stand up and start moving, otherwise we won't get
Non-residents,
group
5 and 6.
Should you enforce it by law? So these are difficult issues. And I'm glad as I walk through the different groups listening to your discussions that many of you were confronting that directly. And some of you, as I said, had very different viewpoints on this one. So we'll try and put it all down and summarize it as accurately as we can in the paper. And we'll publish it on my Facebook and we'll submit it to MOM. And then we'll see what happens. But don't forget 2 things. If there are any doubts about anything that's happened today, please let us know and we'll try our best to address those. And the second thing is, please don't let the conversation end, right? Because people are going to talk about this. And I suspect when MOM reviews or releases or changes the CPF system, there'll be more conversations that are going to happen. The minimum sum scheme, which was introduced some time ago, but the recalculation or the new formula was actually announced in 2003. So this is not something that just happened this year. In 2003, they said this is what they were going to do. And that's why the minimum sum has been increasing since 2003. It's become a big issue this year instead of last year, for different reasons, I suspect. But don't forget that the next review is next year. So there's a good chance that the minimum sum of 155 this year may well be higher next year, But all this has been written down since 2003 already. So these are not new things. But I think what is most important is that we all educate ourselves as to the facts. And if the facts are not available, then we ask questions and get the facts. Okay? Alright, again, we've overshot our time. I thank you for all your time. And I know we've gone, I think we're serving lunch. We're serving lunch, so that's compensation.